Welcome back. Now let's add some more interactivity to our application by adding some tabs. As you can see, each of our products has a description, specification, and reviews tab. Twitter Bootstrap comes with some classes, which make it pretty easy to construct some tabs, like you see here. But how do we add behavior to these tabs so that when we select one, it becomes active and the content gets displayed in the page? One way to do this in Angular is by using the ngClick directive, which takes an expression to evaluate. So here we're saying tab equals 1 when we click on the first one, tab equals 2 when we click on the second, and tab equals 3 when we click on the third. If we want to print out this value to the page, we can simply write tab as an expression. Let's see what this is going to do. So if we jump into the browser, we can see that if we click on the different tabs, the tab value gets printed out to the screen. Pretty neat, huh? We never defined tab, but just by clicking on those different tabs, it changes the value. We're starting to get into the magic of Angular. When we click on one of those tab items, the tab expression automatically gets updated. See, expressions like this define a two-way data binding. A two-way data binding. This means that expressions are reevaluated when the property changes. So that expression is keeping an eye out for when that value of tab changes. And if it does get changed, it gets updated in the web page. Now that we have the tab navigation figured out, we need to create the tab panels. You know where the content for the tab goes? So let's flesh that out. As you can see here, content in each of them. But how do we get the proper panel to show up when we click on that corresponding tab navigation? Well, we need to use ngShow again. We can say ngShow, and this time pass in an expression. When tab is equal to 1, display this one. When tab's equal to 2, show this one. And when tab's equal to 3, show that one. Now when a tab is selected, it's going to show the proper panel. Here we are back in our browser, and you'll see when we click on a tab, it shows the proper panel. But when we refresh the page, none of the panels are showing up. It would be good to set an initial value for tab. How do we do that? The ngInit directive allows us to evaluate an expression in the current scope. So here we're going to write ngInit equals tab equals 1, which is going to initialize the value of tab to 1. So if we jump back into the browser, we can see that tab is initialized to 1 and the description panel is shown. But wouldn't it be nice to show which tab is active? And in fact, Bootstrap has classes so that the right tab gets highlighted. How might we detect which tab is active and then add a class to the appropriate tab? To do this, big surprise, we need to use a new directive, the ngClass directive, which takes a bunch of arguments, but we're going to send in an object. In this object, we're going to specify as a key the name of the class that we want to set, and then as a value, an expression to evaluate. If this expression is true, we'll append this class to the element, and if it's not, we're not. In our case, we're going to check to see if the tab is equal to 1, and if it is, we'll set the class to active. And then, of course, 2 and 3 for the other tabs. Then back in our browser, you can see that our tabs are now using the active class properly. Much nicer. If it's starting to feel a little bit dirty, a little bit wrong, that you're putting all of this logic inside your HTML page, well, you're kind of right. We need to figure out how to pull that logic into something to organize it. The best place here might be a controller. Not our store controller. We need a new controller for this logic. Maybe we'll call it our panel controller. First, we'll use the ngController directive. specifying our panel controller as panel. Panel is our alias that we'll be using inside of this element to refer to our panel controller. Then in our app.js, we'll define our panel controller. Our next step is to move the tab initialization inside of our panel controller. ng-init is great for prototyping, but really initialization and configuration should go inside of a controller. In this case, we'll make tab a property of our controller, so we'll be able to refer to it as panel.tab. Next, let's take the assignment logic out of our HTML and create a function expression. This is going to take a parameter, setTab, and inside of this function, we'll set the tab property equal to that variable. And then inside of our ngClick expression, we'll simply call panel.selectTab1, panel.selectTab2, and panel.selectTab3. Lastly, let's create a function for our comparison. We'll call it isSelected. Then we'll check to see if the current tab is equal to this tab to check and return the value. This will be either true or false. And notice here that we're calling isSelected both inside the ng class directive and in the panels to detect which one is selected. Now if we jump back over into the browser and select the different tabs, we can see that the behavior hasn't changed. Everything still works, but our code is a little cleaner. It's challenge time, so why don't you shape up with some Angular, and I'll see you in level 3. Welcome back! Prettied out.